Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another awesome review for you with a channel favorite, Christopher Ward. Christopher Ward was, of course, founded out of London in the UK. They're a micro brand that is, for me, kind of ascended into more of the boutique brand space because I just think they're just a little bit more of a level above what you would just consider a micro brand. I think definitely in scale, you could still consider them, of course, an independent micro brand, but I really do feel that they offer something that's very special, and they have a certain design language. I think they've actually established themselves now kind of through many iterations of quite a few different models to really have their own aesthetic, and I think that's something that I think probably every micro brand hopes to be in those shoes at some point. So this particular watch is, of course, a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language when looking for a dive watch: you're going to want, of course, water resistance through some type of screw down crown, something tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and if you do have it on a bracelet, it is always nice to have some type of dive extension. Now, this particular model is the C60 Trident day+date COSC limited edition. It's quite a mouthful, yes, but you know what? It does offer quite a punch. As stated, yes, it is a COSC rated chronometer. And it also has the day-date complication. Two things I think on the C60 that really make it stand out from the kind of run-of-the-mill C60, which is already completely overbuilt and stacked as far as specs go and pricing. I mean, honestly, it's a watch. The C60 in general is a watch that a lot of people will bring up on my other videos whenever I review another nice watch, especially for a diver, because it offers so much value. It's almost that kind of line where it's like, well, does it offer more value than a C60? And how much nicer could it possibly be, honestly, because the C60 is just such a fully loaded piece. And this is like the next level for me as far as the Trident, being fully loaded. Now that there's a extra complication, and it's also COSC, it's a COSC chronometer. So, and it's not that much more money. I mean, the retail on this is $1,100 on Bracelet. You can get it for less if you get it on rubber or leather, I believe, or it might be a leather. I'll have to double check. Hey, or you could. I'll leave a link in the description below. So let's go ahead and zoom out here and get this in hand and take a closer look. So as you can see, I mean, still the same basic kind of shape and specs as the original C60 Trident Pro 600 that we all love, but this is, of course, post the rebrand, so there are going to be some changes, but they are pretty much mostly aesthetic. But as far as the finishing goes, it's all very much what we've seen in the past, and that is not a bad thing, because what we've seen in the past is really sheer excellence in its class. So as the specs kind of went across the screen earlier, this is considered a 43 millimeter. For the longest time, it was actually considered a 42. The case itself is actually about a 42, but it's the bezel that's actually more of a 40, I believe, or that might be reversed. Maybe it was the case was a 43, but the bezel was a 42. So they used to market it as a 42, but it's a 43, but it's pretty much the exact same size as it's always been. Now, the height is 13.85 millimeters high, so it is fairly thick, but it is a diver, and I think actually the case silhouette wears really nicely, so it doesn't come off as actually being very bulbous or thick. The crystal is 3.4 millimeters thick. It's a sapphire with AR coating. The bezel is a unidirectional rotating bezel, of course. Nice, snappy, 120 click, really beautifully done. I mean, for the money, I mean, no play. There's just on its way to the next click, and that click, really, really nice. And then the crown is of course screw down, and it has the new branding here, as you can see. The two lovely flags there. It's actually a combination of the Swiss flag and I want to say London's flag. So I think that's really a cool design. And of course, one of the nice things is now that it doesn't say CW, it's not like there's really a right side up or a wrong side to have it. So you can actually, when you screw it down, you don't have to worry about it being perfect or being legible in any way, because now it's a logo versus initials. So that's definitely a nice little touch. And the movement inside, of course, although you can't see it because there is a very nicely executed stamped case back there. As you can see, really beautifully done. The font has changed, but everything else remains just as glorious. And if you look close enough, you can see that my particular model is number 007 out of 200. How cool is that? Thanks, Christopher Ward. Thanks, team, for being able to meet that little request of mine. So definitely appreciated. Let's move over to the front. Of course, there's the Gouache wave dial, synonymous with the C60. Of course, there are some models that do not have the wave dial, like the vintage models, but the rest of the models pretty much all have that great wave dial. Hopefully the camera can catch the texture there. Really nice. And then it does have, as you can see, applied indices. It has a day-date complication at 3 o'clock, which is really nice, especially now with the Christopher Ward, you know, typeface there on the 9 o'clock. I think it really adds some great balance. It uses C1 Swiss Superluminova. It's water resistant up to 600 meters or 2,000 feet. It has, of course, as you can see, the main difference there as far as the hands goes is now you actually have this really great red trident, which makes it almost like a little devil's pitchfork, which I thought was pretty cool as well. I definitely do like that little detail. And then, of course, the red pip triangle there. And then the bezel insert itself is also slightly different because now it's fully indexed, very reminiscent of the mill sub, and it actually adds the 5-minute counter as well as the 15 there, just for a little extra detail, which does give it a very nice kind of militant look there. And I think it really suits the aesthetic very nicely. I think this is actually the insert from the or a different take on it anyway, but it's a similar bezel insert that's on the actual chronograph C60. So I think it's really cool that they were able to, you know, get a little bit more use out of the tooling that they used for that piece, and I think it just looks absolutely gorgeous on here and gives it a really nice aesthetic and just look and feel. I think it's another big home run as far as you know, design kind of meeting function there, and I think it really speaks to kind of the modern Christopher Ward look versus, you know, the older style, which if you're definitely interested in checking out, check out my channel because I've pretty much reviewed every iteration thus far. So now to get to the bracelet, the lug distance here is 22 millimeters. It does have a beautiful taper down to 18 millimeters. It has solid end links, and it uses a pin and collar system to connect the solid links. It also has a micro adjust / quick adjust clasp here. As you can see, essentially you just pull this little lever and then you pull that in and out, and it does offer some nice micro adjusts. So if your wrist swells or anything like that, it's really nice to be able to kind of on the fly with no tools expand or retract it. And then it's also really nice to help get an exact fit. And then one of the nice things here, of course, even the folding stuff is all milled out and also signed, which is great. And it's even contoured. If you take a look here underneath, if the camera can get to it, this piece right here that goes up against your wrist is actually really nicely contoured and rounded off. It's not flat or sharp in any way, and it's just one of those nice little touches that when a brand does that, as you can see that little soft bevel there, the light kind of catches it, but really nice and comfortable on the wrist. And then of course the button deployment, really beautiful. So let's go ahead and get this on wrist. Oh, let me remove this glove here. And as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, I think it wears really beautifully. Go ahead and get it down low for you so you can see kind of a more of a full wristy there versus the up close where everything looks pretty big. So as you can see, works really well, just like you'd expect from the, you know, the current C60 line. And I think it actually, you know, with the little tweaks, little differences, little accents, it really does differentiate the watch enough to where if you already own a C60, I think it does warrant to check this one out. I mean, they actually also do have a model that uses a Solita movement, also COSC, but it's just the day. I'm sorry, the date complication, there's no day. For me, I think the day complication is just really cool and different and helps differentiate this from my other C60s, but it also does add some balance to the dial, which I think is really cool. I would, you know, honestly, Christopher Ward, if you are listening, I think you should do more day-date models, even in non-COSC spec. Although it will make my watch less special, I think with the new branding, it really does add an extra level of balance to the dial. So, as you can see, this thing is just a stunner. I mean, the finishing, the brushing, the polishing, really everything is just great. On wrist, of course, it wears really nice. It is on the larger side, but by no means does this to me appear to be an oversized watch. I think the way with the bracelet tapers, it's just adds another level of refinement that you just don't see. I mean, these watches really started out at their core being very much compared to the Steinhardt Ocean One line, and they were both kind of considered as you know, that $400 to $600 sweet spot in dive watches, but somehow Christopher Ward has really grown, and I think they've really outgrown that kind of micro brand frame of mind where they're just trying to fit into there. I think now people are really not looking at a C60 as an alternative to something else. You know, it's not like before where, hey, maybe you wanted a sub or a Planet Ocean or something like that. Hey, maybe you would check out Christopher Ward. I think now it's actually draws its own crowd. I think it's very distinctive look. I think it offers a really nice just you know, experience of ownership in general, just because they have amazing warranties and customer service is top notch. You know, everything is just everything's aligned for this company, and they're just a brand that really, I think, is blazing a trail for other micro brands out there. And I think even some micro brands are learning from Christopher Ward what not to do, right? I think one of Christopher Ward's main hurdles is that it started out in that really value proposition range. So even when they did start offering things like in-house movements and whatnot, and chronometer rated movements, some people still didn't want to pay that much just because, you know, they're used to this watch being so much cheaper. So even though they've added so much value to it, I think it still is hard to kind of break that stigma. But hey, I think Christopher Ward's definitely taken it in stride. But I think some other micro brands out there have actually taken note of that. And I think some of them are actually starting their prices a little bit higher, and they're being a little bit more ambitious because they see that there is a successful business model in this price range, in the micro brand range. You know, you can be a small independent brand, put out something that's new, fresh, has a cohesive design, that speaks a great design language, and then of course offers tons of bang per buck. I mean, you have something 600 meters water, they could have stopped at 300. I think it would still be cool if they put out a 300 meter version. They do a 300 meter quartz, but I think an automatic 300, maybe a thinner profile, something like that. I think that would still be a really cool you know, offering, because 600 meters, although it's great, you know, it's really you know, it's really just a question of being overbuilt and kind of giving you that, you know, it's just street cred. You know, that's kind of the currency of dive watches is, you know, how deep it goes, how cool the bracelet is, the aesthetic, the history, you know, all those things, you know, Sapphire, AR, you know, does it have good lume, ceramic insert, all that. So those are, you know, those are pretty much the things that decide the value of a dive watch. And I mean, really, Christopher Ward has it in spades. Let's check out the lume there. As you can see, really nice. Of course, it's thinly applied to a certain extent, but you know, it's one of those things. They're smaller indices. If they had bigger indices, I think they'd glow much brighter. Of course, it would be cool if they used something like a BGW9 in the future, or maybe even had C3 variants. Again, I'm gonna kind of bring in my little low light here so we can get some coverage of what this looks like in low light. Transition there. As you can see, really beautiful, gorgeous piece. Let me just get it over there. So we're not just seeing it under the hot studio lights. We're actually getting a look at it here in some more natural light there. The nice transition. Look at how gorgeous that is in the lume. Just fantastic. Couldn't be more pleased with this piece. And I'm really happy to be bringing you this review nice and early. So with that said, let's go ahead and hit the lights. All right. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I know there's a lot of people that aren't happy about, you know, the new branding and logo and whatnot. Hey, I was one of you. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't completely on board. And I think it's been a transitionary thing. You know, they basically took models that were designed with the old logo in mind and put the new logo on, and it wasn't the most cohesive thing, and they hit a couple bumps, I think, design-wise. But looking at it now, when you see a model like this that basically was laid out with the intention of having, you know, the logo at the 9 o'clock, now that you have that day-date at 3, it just fills the dial really nicely and adds a lot of balance. And you know, when you're looking at a diver, symmetry is definitely something a lot of people think about. So it's that simplicity and legibility, readability, that really is key when it comes to having a timeless design, when it comes to any wristwatch. And it's even more so important, I'd say, in dive watches because of the iconic dive watches in the past, you know, from the original, you know, bezel equipped diver, the 50 fathoms from Long Pond, to of course the iconic Rolex Submariner, down to the Seamaster 300. I mean, these designs just have a certain balance, a certain aesthetic, a certain timelessness to them, you know, like a Porsche 911 that is just refined and just so well executed, and it just has its own design language. So I think at this point there are even companies that are starting to kind of even mainstream companies that are taking a note out of the C60 playbook. I think one I saw recently that looks really interesting is the Raymond Wheel Freelancer diver. It has like a Jubilee bracelet, which I think is really cool, but aesthetically it looks very similar to a C60. It just like doesn't have crown guards, and so I mean it looks very similar. Of course there's also Vempe. They do have a diver that looks similar to the C60 as well. I'm not sure which one. I'm sure the C60 came first, but in some of its more recent iterations it actually looks quite similar now that they've gone to the ceramic insert. So I mean it's just a cool looking watch. I think kind of the old stigma that it was just kind of a mishmash of classic dive cues, you know, dive watch cues, put it together to make one watch, I think are kind of gone now, and it speaks its own design language, and it draws its own crowd based on its own merits. So I think that's pretty cool. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks guys. Bye.